So, welcome everybody to our Inspiring Thoughts podcast today. I'm delighted to have a very close friend and also work partner as well, from this perspective, to have Dominic Human today, from who's Director of Human HR Services. So, Dom, great to have you on board for the podcast today. Really delighted to have you here.
Thanks, Stephen. Very much appreciate the invite. Having seen some of your previous podcasts, I feel honoured to be with you today.
Oh, you're going to make me blush already, Dom. You can't do that. You can't do that from that point of view. Yeah, but we've had some really good podcasts and really interesting. But I thought it'd be great to get, because of the work we've been doing, but also from your expertise, etc., to share with our audience today. So, to share with everybody, would you just give people a kind of your career history, a brief career history, so people get to know you, Dom?
Yeah, absolutely, Stephen. So it's really quite straightforward. I joined the police at 18 and I stayed there for 30 years, retiring at the age of 48. During that time in the police service, encountered an awful lot of conflict and distress and the darker side of human nature. But one of the specialisms that I had was that I was a hostage and crisis negotiator, which was anything from a face-to-face intervention with someone contemplating ending their life, right through to the negotiation and release of hostages.
Yeah, so it's a very, very completely different world from me in my banking world. And I know you and I've had many conversations about different worlds and paths. But so actually, from our point of view, having you as an expert around kind of the title we've called it today is the art of conflict conversations, a real specialist in that field for you. And I also know that you deal with a lot of complex investigations and complex work to really kind of pull things back together or pull it apart to make people move forward. So if we dive into our kind of questions today, so from your experience, Dom, how does conflict usually begin? So it's probably the $64 million question, but how do you see conflict from your position start to unfold or unravel?
So it is a $64 million question, and if I had a solution for it, I'd be a wealthy man, and and the world, I think, would probably be a better place. I don't think there's one single contributor. There are many factors in the causes of conflict. Conflict is inevitable. I think that's the first thing that we need to say. It's how it's dealt with, how it manifests itself, whether it's constructive or destructive. Now, what we see all too often is the destructive side of conflict, which is that we feel that someone's deliberately said something about us, or we're being marginalized, or treated differently, bullied, or just we had someone that we encounter with a different set of values and opinions to us. And I think my experience is that actually since COVID, since lockdown, is that we're seeing the manifestation of negative conflict rapidly going through the expected channels much quicker than it would have done perhaps 10 years ago.
And it's that bit there about conflict as well, where it manifests from or where it grows from. And I know, like today, a lot of people think conflict's bad, but actually conflict's all right if it's dealt with in a constructive point of view. Would you just tell our audience a bit more about what does constructive conflict mean? Because people automatically think conflict is a bad thing, but it's not. It's a good thing as well. So would you just share with people what kind of your views around constructive conflict?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I suppose that the terminology in itself would suggest that there's a problem. We might call it a constructive disagreement, differing opinions. So that is the healthy side of having a healthy debate, where everybody has a voice. We can be heard. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody agrees with our opinion, but that we have a sense of being heard and respected.
Yeah.
The challenge always comes is that if we put forward an idea, or we're very we've got a lot of conviction in a suggestion or an opinion that we have. If others don't buy into it, we feel that we're then in negative conflict rather than actually having a great discussion and opening our minds and our views to the enrichment of understanding, the opinions of others around us. That the ability to do that is significantly challenged, I think, by a number of circumstances. But if we think about the busy world that we operate in now, the fear of change, for example, the social media, and perhaps we'll talk about that in terms of it's become kind of one of the biggest areas for me in the work that I do, both in investigations and mediation. Social media has a significant part to play in that. So, we just coming back to your question, we can have a difference of opinion and disagree well.
Yes.
That's the key thing. But it's not necessarily a natural way for us to go about that. And particularly, you and I do a lot of work and understanding around personality profiling, and we know, that there are a number of those individuals that we meet who would either naturally be a people pleaser, which would be a sort of passive endorsement of someone else's opinion that they might not necessarily agree with themselves, or we've got individuals that will step forward and will push and push and push their own agenda or their own thought processes. And this is where conflict occurs. I think the other key thing is, just to finish off that part, is that we think as human beings we're great communicators, and we're not. We have to constantly work at it. If we find the number of times we might say, no, that's not what I meant, that's not what I said. That's particularly the written word, where it's open to so much interpretation. So, as I say, it's complex, and if I could find an easy solution to identify the positives, I think I'd be a wealthy man.
Yeah, and to pick up a couple of bits there, I think it's really good. So constructive conflict is healthy, it's good, it's rich. You and I are different personalities if we looked at kind of the disprofiling, that point of view. However, we have that mutual respect of going, let's share ideas, let's talk, and we challenge each other around it. But a really good phrase you shared with me recently was about shaking hands with good grace and then walking away and being respectful. What we do see a lot is that constructive conflict going from a healthy debate to a I win you lose scenario, and then it moves into that destructive conflict, which becomes quite nasty, bitty, those kind of things. And then that email revolution revs up and gets out of control. And what I find fascinating is going through that destructive path, people lose sight of what actually was really the issue in the first place, because people start gathering allies, enemies, those kind of stuff. It loses sight, doesn't it? And you would have noticed that as well on your path, how it just grows out of control, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And you were, as you were talking there, you might have seen a wry smile about a situation that always springs to mind. So forgetting about what the conflict was about, but being entrenched and embedded in it. And just a very quick story, if I may, a mediation scenario. Two colleagues in a workplace involved in a conflict that had been going on for 10 years. And essentially, a conversation early on would have nipped in the bud the difficulties between the two. It didn't happen. It manifested itself over a 10-year period, we saw people, seeking support and alignment for their own viewpoints, and therefore, behind the scenes, there's an awful lot of conflict that's gone on where actually the party wasn't aware. They're last to know. And actually, in that situation, without going into too much detail, some really severe consequences within that conflict. And when we finally got them in the room and said, 10 years ago, what happened? They initially couldn't remember. And then actually, when they did remember what it was actually something of such a minor situation. And yet it had been allowed to manifest and get out of control. Now, that's perhaps an extreme example, but it's a very good example of how we move through conflict, and we lose the original understanding of why we might be in conflict, to being entrenched for 10 years.
Yes,
it's something that was very resolvable and was in fact resolved in the space of a conversation.
And it's just that amazing bit about, I love that question, because it's the art of conversation, conflict conversation. We have a going back and going, just talk us through what happened. And what's really good is that where we usually have the parties separated from each other, because people always think mediation or conflict conversations, chuck two people in a room and they'll sort it out, which is so dangerous. But what's really good is when we have those people separate and ask the questions, etc., it gets that deeper thinking of, actually, what did go wrong? And where did we, so we unpick it, which is really, really nice point of view. And also, I think the bit which you kind of build up there is just that kind of softer approach to people. We're not judging people. That's the other art of that kind of conflict, is just there to help facilitate, because some people need just to unpick it with a professional rather than a line manager, isn't it? And what would you see is the kind of most common conflicts you see, or if you're doing like a family fortunes top 5 or whatever, what would you see is where conflict usually goes awry?
So I mentioned earlier social media, and it's not just social media; it's essentially the written word. So the use of, for all of the benefits of mobile communication, and email and social media, WhatsApp and what have you, for all of the benefits of that, the downside is that, as I said, we don't know what's in the mind of the person that's writing at that moment in time, and we don't know what's going on with the individual that's receiving the message. And I was talking to a director of a global company only last week who made the point that he now pauses. He now doesn't hit the transmit button until the following morning. And I think that's become, we've become so used to just typing messages, reply, etc., in our in our social circle, that we've become familiar with doing that in our work circle. And so I see that as a major contributor. I think, and I mentioned this just briefly earlier, I think society, I think there's a sense of economic gloom, threat to us in terms of the things that we value and our ability to function in life. Thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there are people that have gone down that pyramid of self-actualization to survival mode. And survival mode puts us in very much into that conflict. You'll have heard me talk previously, going back to lockdown, the toilet roll scandal, we were toilet roll. And yet there were people that were stockpiling it. We feel threatened, and what happens is we go into that, fight or flight mode. I think the other side of it is, and this is very positive, is that we're calling stuff out much earlier. And I really endorse that as a a positive process. So we're not putting up with stuff. We're calling it out much quicker. I think the difficulty is that by calling it out much quicker, it's the response to that. Either the response of a direct conversation with someone to say, could I just say to you, when you did that or when that happened, it made me feel like we feel sort of very defensive. I think the other side of that is that we tend to put our own value set on someone who might bring conflict to us, and we might marginalize it because it's not something that feels important to us, or not something maybe that we've experienced. And again, it's the lack of recognition early on. If someone brings something to our attention that's causing anxiety, we might not understand it.
Yeah.
But it's important that we respect that there is that feeling that has manifested itself with that individual, and it's right that we do something about it.
And I love the bit there also, Dom. If you go back to kind of Stephen Covey's emotional bank account about attending to the little things, that's super important for those colleagues that it may not be in our mind relevant or of that kind of, but in their mind that's really, really important. And if we don't attend to those smaller things, they get bigger things, they grow out of control. And I heard you use recently, which is a really good phrase, and it really resonated with me, about all of a sudden people become hypersensitive and hypervigilant if those little things aren't attended to. So someone coming saying to you, Dominic, things aren't good at home, and people go, okay, fine, and move on. It's sitting down with that colleague and having a chat with them. Actually, it could be a really big thing for them, maybe small for us, but really bringing it out makes a big difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't tell you the number of times that I've seen the benefit of a listening ear.
Yes.
The active listening that we talk about so passionately. And this is another really important point. Essentially, we geared up we listen to respond.
Yeah.
We don't listen. A conversation in normal circumstances, a bit like a game of tennis. It's my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn, and then it naturally comes to an end. Well, when we're in active listening, when we're properly getting a true understanding of what the other party's saying, is that our contribution is so much less. Our contribution is minimal encourages, just okay. Silence, but and again, it's important that we demonstrate that person is valued to us at that time. Putting down the pen, not writing, notes on a keyboard, but giving them the proper attention that they need. And you're right, essentially, we do go into hypervigilance, hypersensitivity, and then it's important to make the distinction of it's not oversensitive, it's hypersensitive.
Yes.
We've essentially something grown in our mind as being a problem, and the natural way that we go about things is we seek endorsement of that at every opportunity. So it puts us in a heightened state of alert. Now, we can't function well in a heightened state of alert. We can for a short period of time. But if you think that you've got people that live like that because they feel under threat, under siege, then it's very easy to understand how you can see something in front of you that can fit the narrative created in your mind, or that is in your mind.
Yeah. And it's I think I love the couple of words about you're looking for endorsement of kind of your behavior, what you've done, to endorse that, kind of to carry it on. If it's endorsed because you're being hypervigilant, going, I knew they were going to do that, so it's just again. That's the kind of bit, and you've lost sight of all your other good work, all the other stuff you're doing because you're focused on that person. But what I loved also, the bit there is we allow people to talk and we actively listen. And that's a really interesting thing when we see with leaders. So the art of conflict conversation, people aren't listening; they're on their own agenda. Actually, really truly listen to that colleague. And I think the bit there is we all know when we're being listened to. That's not a special art. That is, we know when we're listened to and we know when we're not listened to. That's just human behavior. But that's that kind of giving that person that quality time, putting that pen down, stop doing tapping on a keyboard. People can see that on Zoom and Teams and that kind of stuff. Really giving that focus because that person is really opening up their heart or their issues to you, isn't it? Because people share with us some really sensitive stuff, don't they? When we really break through, they really get stuff off their shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is an art. But there's some very simple ways that we can go into active listening mode.
Yeah.
We always need to make a conscious decision in our own mind. Okay, I need to stop. I need to give this my complete attention, and I need to change my contribution to the normal rules of the conversation. So actually, I am a listening ear. I am demonstrating that I'm interested. I might summarize to ensure that I've properly understood. I might use minimal encourages, as we call them, a sort of a nodding and what have you. All of these little things that we just need to go into a conscious mode to do, to provide the best opportunity to get the understanding from that other party. And that's the key thing. If not, we end up spinning things to fit our own narrative and our own agenda. You'll have heard me say this before. In any given situation, there are at least three truths. There's my truth, your truth, and the truth. And that's perfectly normal because we'll all see and hear things slightly differently.
Yeah.
That saying, I think, stands the test of time.
Yeah.
That we become so entrenched in a situation, a narrative, that however it's manifested, that we're not willing to even concede.
Yes.
Sometimes that actually there is a different perspective, there's a different view.
Yeah.
And as I say, there's a lot of complexities involved in that. But I think if we just pause and just go, in any given situation, there are at least three truths: my truth, your truth, and the truth.
Yeah.
Then we set we create the right scenario to have an adult to adult conversation, a non-threatening conversation, because we've created the right space and right environment.
Yeah.
But I'm here. I'm ready to listen.
Yeah. And it also, for pickup, which people on our audience will hear either through kind of seeing on the screen through YouTube, etc., or hearing kind of through audio through Amazon and Spotify, is about tone of language and voice is so important. So my natural tone is I speak really quick and can we move quickly, those kind of things. But actually, when I'm really working with people, I really slow down the voice, but really kind of accentuate words, etc., to make that person hear and show that you're attentive. That's really important, isn't it? Tone and language from that point of view, Dom.
Absolutely. It's a package deal. It's not one thing in isolation. It is a deal. The tone of voice is really important. If you think, in a conflict scenario, we're sort of at this level, where, well, actually, if you've got one party that's just saying, okay, look, and emotional labeling is also important. It seems to me that you're angry, you're upset.
Yeah.
You're starting to make a connection, and it's very difficult for one party to stay up at this level if you've got another party that's saying, okay, I'm here to listen.
Yeah.
Slowing your voice down, slowing your words, and just lowering the tone.
Yeah.
uh, of your voice makes such a difference. It creates a calming environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. I'm not saying we all need to become, sort of yoga experts and what have you, but it's if you just think about kind of creating the right, a smooth, calm environment, that's where you want to get to.
Yeah.
And it makes a difference. And you can very clearly demonstrate that once you've got the art of it. It's very easy to actually influence a room full of people.
Yeah.
With just changing the
Yeah.
pitch.
Yeah.
And slowing down everything down.
Yeah. And where would you, from your perspective, why is it important for colleagues to try and resolve their issues themselves? If there's conflict, destructive conflict, or why is it important for colleagues to try and sort it out themselves first? Why is that good?
Well, it means that as soon as we're seeing a problem, we're identifying it and we're speaking about it. Yeah. That's absolutely vital. The opportunity to just express to someone who may have no idea about something that they've done, or the consequences of a word or phrase used, the opportunity to invite them to reflect on that, to acknowledge that it's had a negative consequence, whether it was intended or not, and to create a understanding, and to create then a situation going forward that says, okay, if there are, in order to strengthen our relationship, please come and talk to me. So that's the first thing. The speed at which we can do that, either we feel comfortable to do it ourselves, or we seek some help to engage a third party to help facilitate a conversation. The less time it has to be destructive. So we're taking ourselves. We're not getting wrapped up in the hypervigilant, hypersensitive mode. We're not seeking endorsement of our view from colleagues, friends. We are facing it. We're straight head on. Now, people will say, and quite rightly, well, there could be power imbalances in terms of a workplace conflict. There could be, different characteristics and what have you. So this is why it's really important to always consider the benefits of a third party, a mediator. So that they get the support that they need. If we think, if we think about the effect on well-being, on mental health, we think, about the costs in terms of sickness absence, productivity. The data is a little bit old now, but something like 18 billion pounds or something. No, 12 billion pounds cost each year, and that's the financial cost that they put on it. What you can't ever measure is the emotional cost. Those individuals that are affected by conflict, and we need to take a positive action at the first point that we become aware of conflict. It's not always easy to do, and I get that. I'm not naive to that, and there's a lot of support that would be required in some circumstances. But I think the key message is the earlier that we can get into some sort of dialogue, the better opportunity we have of finding a resolution and moving forward. And that ultimately has to be the what we want to do.
And there's a phrase that I use with clients, and we talk to people about leaning into it. Actually, that speed, rather than it fester, people build allies, etc. Lean into it, but also just think about what you want to say, and how you want to say it. Think about that tone and pitch of, I need to have a chat with you. You may not have been aware. So really actually showing humility rather than going, you're wrong, and I'm going to tell you why you're wrong, because that person may not be aware of it. Whereas actually, so I need to have a chat with you. These things that affect me, you may not have been aware of it, but can we just discuss it? That's such a nice way of doing it, and professional rather than aggressor kind of pose or kind of distinction. So, what tools would you say is available to people to really improve their art of conflict conversations or those kind of things done? What tools are available to people?
So I think there's a number of ways that you can go about this in terms of positively managing conflict. There are many organisations that you know as well as I do that are now moving forward with this, essentially seeking some informal resolution ahead of invoking policies that might take us down a formal pathway for investigation. So those companies that do that really lead the way in setting the tone and expectation and support. I think as soon as you've got an individual that feels that they're in conflict, there needs to be a pathway for them to be able to express that. And as I said earlier, it's not necessarily that we seek to understand, because it might not be something that resonates with us, but that we seek to acknowledge that someone is in conflict. It's then creating an environment where essentially we can have an open and honest conversation. And again, that's very much around, from an organisation's perspective, nailing its colours to the mast to say that we are a mature, emotionally intelligent organisation that understands that conflict will occur. It's our response to it that makes the significant difference. So it's making sure that we've got people that understand what's available within their own workspace. We need to certainly make sure that managers and leaders are skilled in the art of active listening. Because these will trigger for us some warning signs. So again, coming back to my experience, some of these things have been raised but haven't been properly acknowledged or dealt with. Which means that they will manifest. They won't go away. That's the key thing. So some upskilling there, and just making the time. And we think we're incredibly busy. But making the time, if someone makes us aware of conflict, to pause and properly reflect on what's being said. If we take away, as you said, the personalisation of you're this and you're that, talk about when this happened, it made me feel like. It's so much easier to begin to respond positively to that because you're less under threat. You are essentially, someone is saying, I'm not saying you've done this deliberately, but this is how something made me feel. And if we, those are the important things. Access to mediation, good quality mediation is so important. I think there's we all have to start out somewhere. Let's be clear about that. But this is an unregulated sort of industry, and what we have is a lot of well-minded individuals, motivated individuals who want to make a difference, who go on a course and then essentially are felt that they're equipped to deal with every type of conflict. In fact, I was talking to a lady yesterday who had met on a training course last September, really distraught because her first mediation was a 5-year-old conflict where she didn't feel that she'd been able to give her best of that. So we've got mediation, but quality mediation. Making sure that we've got people that are experienced in conflict and comfortable in that environment and can maintain their neutrality as well. This is another difficulty, is that when someone shares with us emotionally, we tend to become invested in them, and we have to. It's not that we can't empathise with them, but we have to remain impartial and slightly detached from. Otherwise, we're doing a disservice to the process. So, I would encourage anybody that's in conflict, first and foremost, to acknowledge it themselves. Speak to trusted colleagues, speak to a line manager, a friend. Again, talk very much in the workplace, but this is, within the communities as well. And just seek some support. Get a listening ear first and foremost. The power of that process should never be underestimated. The number of people that I talk to who then say, "I feel so much better. I don't think I need to go to mediation now." And of course, we go, "That's what you're going to do, because whilst you've told me, tell the other person." So those are the things. Those are the things that are available to them, and I would encourage people I would encourage organisation. I get, some in-house mediation, really important. Having those skills to have those informal, very quick in the bud sort of sessions. But I would equally encourage that pause and reflect on the skill set and the experience of individuals to be able to properly feel confident in the mediation environment, because it is complex, it's tiring, it's draining for everybody involved, and we need to make sure that we enhance the reputation and benefits positively.
I think you're spot on there about keep enhancing your skills, professionalism. It is complex, it is hard work, it is draining. It's not two people just chuck them in a room and see who wins. It's a really good scientific way that we work through with people to really get them to trust us, to open up, but showing that it's confidential, it's voluntary, we're impartial. They're coming up with the ideas to take forward. It's a really good, but it's a good proven method from that point of view. So, Dom, we get asked often is kind of what's on your personal development for this year? What's Dom looking to improve or develop this year?
It's a good question, Stephen. So I've just finished a forensic psychology diploma. So I'm now signed up for a level 7 diploma in coaching and mentoring. I do business mentoring. Small and medium companies. I'm qualified in doing that, but I want to sort of formalise the coaching and mentoring side of things. So I'm doing a level 7 in that, and I'm also 3/4 of the way through being an internal quality assurance assessor for things like degree equivalent assignments and what have you. So in amongst everything else, I'm keeping my mind active.
And I love that. Keep pushing yourself, isn't it? To really your new comfort zone, to keep learning, to keep moving forward. And I think that's the richness where you and I are always constantly talking about not how do we always get better, but how do we improve? How can we question things? How can we develop? It's just a great thing to keep moving forward. Otherwise, you'll stay still from that point of view. So just to finish off our conversation, because you and I can chat, we know we have many chats that we have. How can people get hold of you, Dom? Just to finish, if anyone wants to reach out, or what's the best way to get hold of you, Dom?
So the easiest way, Stephen, is if you go to the website www.HHR Services Limited, abbreviated to ltd.co.uk, or of course they can contact me through you.
Yeah, fantastic. So, and I would just say for anyone out there, connect with Dom. Very, very wise words, as you've heard from today. Really great to work with from that perspective. So, Dominic, can I just say a huge thank you for being on our podcast today, and also have a wonderful weekend, but a real big thank you for you joining us today.
Thanks, Stephen. As I say, it's a real privilege to be invited, and it's been great to talk to you again.
Wonderful. Thank you ever so much, Dom. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Take care.